This is F.D. Recovery, where we interview addicts and alcoholics.
Our aim is that through this podcast, we might help you on your journey of recovery.
Thank you for listening. Hello, this is Frank with F.D. Recovery, and we're back with the weekly edition of the Weekly Intention. Basically, what we do is we go week to week with a spiritual principle and or topic, and we work it in our recovery. So this week, we'll be working on priorities. But before we get into that, we'll talk a little bit about what we worked last week, which was humor. So I picked humor last week is because, sometimes life can get a little bit serious, and we can sometimes think very highly of ourselves, right? So the reason I picked humor last week and do a recap of that is because sometimes we need to lighten up, right? Especially in recovery, things can get tricky day to day, right? Dealing with the obsession of alcoholism and drug addiction. We're now stepping into the sober life and learning to live clean and sober, and that comes with its own set of issues, feelings, emotion, not knowing really how to do much, right? For me, it was like I never lived in the real world, never had a job, never did any of that. So I was really starting over on an infant level, right? And I think starting over and getting back into the routine of life, right? We seem to take things serious, right? Because we kind of have to, because it's a serious situation. At least that's what my recovery was like. I was taking everything real serious, and I was getting real, down and gritty about my program, and sometimes, that can get a little overbearing. Right? You got to give a little bit of room for grace. And for me, the way it works, I believe that humor helps break the ice with a lot of this tension, a lot of this misperception, a lot of taking yourself serious, right? Humor helps to break that down. It helps bring you back to earth. When you can learn to laugh at yourself, laugh at situations, see your part in the situation and see how you could improve, and also laugh at it, right? There's nothing more important than getting to that place of sweet surrender and just kind of looking at the situation and just cracking a smile and giggling a little bit and just going on and understanding, oh, I'm just human, right? And the important thing through all this is you want to come out with a smile on your face, no matter how hard it can get. It can get difficult in recovery. So my goal is, for me, what I use humor for is getting a smile on my face and not taking myself too serious. Because as soon as I take myself too serious, that means I'm all up in ego, right? And when you're in the domain of ego, it can get pretty tricky because it tells stories. My ego tells me stories. What I think about myself and what I think you think of me isn't really an issue here. It's a non-void, right? I'm in the field of imagination. So I think it's important to break down the barriers of ego and seriousness and all these things, right? Of self-perception that can kind of make you exaggerate your self-importance, right? So for me, I think it's important to bring humor in the picture. Get around people that are willing to laugh with you, willing to talk about the hard stuff, but also make it lighthearted. I think it's super important to be able to look at yourself in a kind heart, look at yourself in a kind of a laughable way, and you can learn to heal those ugly parts of yourself that don't seem so funny when you're in the darkness, right? So Moving on from humor. Funny enough, talking about humor, let's jump on here and see what. Let's see. Hold on. Priorities. Let's see. Priorities. All right, priorities. Let's get a little taste of what Almighty Google has to say about it. All right, priorities. The fact or condition of being regarded or treated as more important. All right. Let's see. In recovery. Let's do that because I think that'll give us a little bit better picture um of what we're trying to achieve here, right? Because this is all about recovery. Let's see. In recovery, priorities means placing your recovery activities like attending meetings, working through the steps, and practicing self care above other life demands to ensure long term sobriety and well being. It involves making deliberate choice to protect your sobriety and build a life where recovery is the foundation for success in other areas like family, work, and relationship because it affects all that. Sobriety, the key priorities in recovery. First one being sobriety. You can't really have recovery without sobriety. Don't get me wrong, relapse are part of some people's stories, but sobriety above all is the most important. The most fundamental priority, yep, and it said it right there. The most fundamental priority to remain abstinent from all substances each day is to remain abstinence, right? Abstinent. And recovery activities. This is important, guys, because sometimes we think just going to meetings is going to keep you sober, and that's not necessarily the case, right? And what it says here, it says the activities and commitments like support sobriety or that support sobriety, such as attending support group meetings, those are important, right? Working through recovery programs like the 12 steps, staying in contact with the sponsor or sober support person, taking prescribed medication and managing appointments. Well, that is important, right? Don't get me wrong. Medication has never been my friend. I always seem to abuse it, but I've seen a lot of success stories, whether it be, psych meds, getting things back into balance. Because sometimes we do some damage out there, and we need a little extra therapy help, right? It could be anything from Suboxone, methadone, and I don't knock anybody's way of life. I think it's all really important. For me, I abuse all those things, so I learned the hard way many times. But for some people, it really helped, and then they got them on the path of sobriety, which is really important. All right, self care, prioritizing activities that help you stay well, and manage stress. Right, ensuring that you get adequate sleep, nutrition, and physical health. Finding time for hobbies, activities that you enjoy, setting healthy boundaries, and managing your emotions. Ooh, another good one. Honesty and integrity. Well, that's a priority they're saying here in in recovery. Being honest with yourself and others about your struggle is a critical priority for staying on track. Healthy relationships, that should be a priority for sure. Healthy relationships, risk of relapse, blah blah blah. So, you know, I wanted to pick priorities is because that's one thing I never really had straight my whole freaking life, right? I never cared about a job. I thought back and my me and my first wife, we came into a lot of money ill-gotten, right? Well, actually, it was me, stealing and robbing and things like that. But we came into a lot of money when we were first starting. We are having my daughter, and we were trying to make a life together. And I priorities just were not in the picture, right? I had no clue how to live life. And not necessarily my priorities wasn't straight. I didn't even know that there was a sense of I was living in such a way that I wasn't thinking about a job. I that just wasn't in my realm of scope, right? I knew my dad worked and stuff like that, but it was never in my mind like to ever get a job, right? Um, I I think I was just doing drugs all the time and kind of lived this willy-nilly free life, right? I was always bouncing around from place to place, so never really anything stable. My dad would kick me out, my mom would kick me out, and just from the gate, I never really got taught anything of any substance, like any kind of how do you say stability, right? So when I fast forward to my first marriage, I realized that looking back on it now, that oh my God, I had no sense of priority. I didn't realize I just stole all this money and got into an apartment and got all these things, and I wasn't even planning to get a job, right? And my well, now ex-wife, she told me, you have to get a job, right? Because this money's just not going to last forever. And that just wasn't in my brain, and I'm like, oh well, the way I used to do life, a quick scheme, right? Go try to sell drugs and do what I can in a negative way with robbing and stealing and selling drugs, and anything to avoid the rat race, right? Because I was really against it, and plus I was super fucking lazy, and I just wanted to get high all the time, right? I wanted to spend my focus on the things I wanted. I was real hedonistic and knew no sense of sacrifice, didn't know anything about how a man should operate, how a man needs to provide for their family. Um, you know, all these things just I didn't know. I was so young and just so stupid for so long, right? And well, as fate would have it, that didn't quite work out, right? So, um I just realized the reason why I picked priorities is because I never had my priorities straight. But today in my recovery, that's like the first thing, the first things first all the time is I know what I need. I know what I need to stay well, right? I know that when I wake up in the morning, I know I gotta go eat. I know I gotta shower. I know I gotta go to work. Those are my priorities. Not just because I have to, right? It's because I get to live this life I live. I got a good paying job. They allow me to work my hours I work. I'm super blessed. They allow me to come in early where I don't have to deal with customers early in the morning, so I can get some of my big work done. Where it would take me a couple hours just to kind of get things set up, and it doesn't work like that. I can't open the doors and like make burritos. It just doesn't work, right? The customers need our attention, and I'm just really blessed that they allow me to do what I do, and it helps me on my check, and it also helps me get some things done that would be much harder and probably keep me later on my shift. So it allows me to get out on a decent time. So that being said, right, today I plan my life in such a way where my priorities is my family first off, how I'm gonna provide for them, how I'm gonna pay the bills, and my second priority is how I'm gonna spend time with them. Right, I every Saturday is dedicated to them, and a little bit of Sunday, and I try to make sure I see my daughter as much as I can throughout the week because it's like two ships passing in the night, right? So, setting those priorities straight and getting us out of this financial hole that, that both of us dug, 'cause we're both, we dug ourselves pretty deep because we were both in our addiction for so long. So we're finally getting out on the other end of it, and California is just pretty expensive, so we're dealing with that too. But now my priorities are changing. Now my priorities are be with the family more. So now I used to work a lot of hours, 7 days a week almost. Well, pretty much 7 days a week for a long time. So now I'm taking Saturdays off and getting back in the swing of things. Is my family's important. Spending time with them is important. So we just went on a trip to Tahoe, and I got to revisit all my old stomping grounds and ran past the jail and just did a couple videos, posted them on Facebook, and just saying how grateful I am to be out of that cycle, right? Probation, jail, juvenile hall, and I remember all those stops constantly, and I just feel super grateful. And that was because I didn't have any of my priorities in line, right? And the priorities I did have, the things that were important to me, were always jails, institution, death bound, right? There was never, there was never a scenario where it's like, I'm going to sell drugs and it's going to work. No, not for, it doesn't do that anyways, right? Even if you don't use, you end up going to get caught on a RICO case or some crazy stuff, and you'll do some major time in the feds. Either way, all roads lead to hell with that stuff. So I just, today my priorities are much different. And recovery helps you see that, right? Recovery helps you see those, how do you say, behind the veil, helps you see through the looking glass, if you have, what have you, helps you see those things that were really just hidden before. And also recovery gives me a sense of hope, right? How do you say? Recovery in a priority sense, right? It makes me believe that I'm gonna achieve my goals, right? Without sobriety and just getting, when I was just getting high, there was no end in sight. I didn't see a future. But with sobriety on my side and working the steps and calling a sponsor and doing all these things, going to my meetings with my priorities straight, and them being family, providing for my family, keeping myself well, my health and fitness, what I eat, and keeping that in line and keeping my priorities straight, I realized that things started to open up to me and hope started entering the picture. So things that I would start, and the endeavors that I would start would actually lead somewhere because I didn't have this short sight of like, nothing's going to work and I can't see past today, right? I'm no longer in that depths of despair. So getting to that, that place of where you could move through it, understand what your tasks are, understand what your goals are. For me today, my priorities are 100% family, 100% my career, right? They are, putting my best foot forward in recovery. And I understand I don't have any of that without my recovery, right? I don't have my family, my job, all these things that I love, the hobbies that I do, the videos, the podcast. I don't have any of this without recovery. There's no life where I have any of these things that I love and still get high. It doesn't mix, right? Without recovery, none of this stuff is possible. I'm not a guy that can drink on the weekends. I'm not a guy that can smoke weed. I'm not a guy that can take any prescription pills, right? I'm just not that type of guy. I can't do it. I release the beast, and something inside me won't stop until I'm in jail, dead, or in another rehab, right? Jails, institutions, and death. So, getting to that realization point, that I cannot use no matter what. And also, sobriety is number one priority in my life. Getting to that point and understanding that I can't put in, and that the 12 steps are going to be the remedy for all this suffering that I am experiencing, that I'm causing to myself, right? That the way out is the way inwards, right? And I heard that a long time ago. And, sometimes we just think, oh yeah, okay, cool words, buddy. But when you start embodying and living some of this lifestyle that we do in recovery, things start really changing. They stop being things stop being just, a fortune cookie. Things stop being just clever words, and you start living it, right? All those cliches you hear in meetings, all the cliche you hear in recovery, they make you roll your eyes in the beginning. But, when you start living and start breathing the program, and you start doing these things that people ask you, suggestions, it starts clicking and you go, oh, you get these aha moments, and they're just awakenings within your process of recovery, right? So there are different rates of recoveries. It also is contingent off how straight you have your priorities. Recovery is going to be the most important um, thing in it all, right? You could make your family a priority, you could make your job a priority, but above all, you cannot slack on your recovery, because you don't have God without recovery. Because really, the recovery process is, your discovering of God. The funny thing about all this, the aha moments that you achieve in recovery are total God shots, right? I first started this journey saying, fuck God, fuck this, fuck you. And I literally would say that crap in meetings, and getting to these pressure points in life and your recovery, and what the steps and get you towards, which is a really purposeful life and a God-centered life. Things start becoming possible, right? Your priorities start falling in line. You start realizing where it matters and where it doesn't, right? The serenity prayer says it all, right? The whole wisdom, the wisdom to know the difference type mentality. Getting to that point, right, where you can decipher what's true and what's not, what you can change and what you can't. That's the most important thing that um, it's allowed me to step into where I need to be as far as setting my priorities straight. So I hope you guys are following week to week. This week, work on your priorities, right? Write down what your priorities are, and don't lie to yourself. That's the most important, right? I'll put it this way. I say my health is the most important. Okay, but I don't do any physical activity. I don't go to the gym. I don't eat right. Well, is that really true? Right? That's the thing about priorities. Are you just saying they're priorities, or are they real priorities? Because the way it works, your priorities show up in your actions, right? My priorities are my work, my recovery, not in that order, but work, recovery, family, all these things, right? And what do? I make time for all of them, every single one of them. My health is a priority. What do? I show up. I show up for myself. I run every single day. I I do the gym. I lift weights. I eat relatively healthy, whole meal foods. I stay at a decent weight. These are all important to me. They're priorities to me. I spend time with my family as much as I can. That allows, it's California. I have to work. So the reality is I could always do better, right? And that's one thing that I will strive to, is just fine tune these priorities and make them real priorities. Don't bullshit yourself. Write them down, and really look at your actions, right? Because you can tell a lot about your actions, and if your priorities really fucking matter, right? You can sit here and do lip service all day, but I'll put it this way: if you're saying things are a priority, great, right? Priorities show up in action. So you say you care about your health. Well, do you go to the gym? Do you eat right? Do you do all these things? Well, your actions will tell you. All you got to do is look at your actions. I say I care about my family. Well, okay. Do I show up for them whenever they need me? Do I provide for them? Do I check all these things off? Well, then that's a deeper look I have to do, right? When I say I care about my job, am I late all the time? Am I showing up? Am I calling in constantly? You can say things are a priority, doesn't necessarily mean they are. Are you doing lip service? And that's the most important thing about when you write your priority list. Are you being real with your priorities, or is it just another thing to say to sound cool? You're worried about image above all, and that's when you're stuck in ego. The most important thing you can do for yourself is be honest with yourself, because that is the springboard to a proper future, a youthful, well, not youthful, because we're all getting fucking old, but the best word for that is a fruitful, right? uh, Getting it down to the nitty gritty and the truth of things. So make your priority list, checking it twice. Gonna see you now, do Donnie, you're nice, right? We're getting in the holiday season, so so check your priorities, do the list, do them twice. Santa Claus is coming to town, you know the whole gig. And you guys, happy Thanksgiving. I love you guys. I might have another, let's see, when is Thanksgiving? I might have another one out by then. But if not, happy Thanksgiving, and I love you guys. Again, priorities, work it this week. I love you. Thank you for tuning in to FD Recovery. A reminder, be kind to yourself on this journey of recovery. Also, call your sponsor, get connected to local support groups, and for one day at a time, stay clean and sober.